Happy Bike Month! Thanks for joining us here at Walking Stories, the California Walks podcast, where we learn from the lived and learned experiences of folks in the community to make our streets safer.
Last month, we had our friends from Families for Safe Streets on to talk about Assembly Bill 2276, better known as the Stop Super Speeders Bill. If you haven't done so already, make sure to check out that episode, link in the corner, and visit our policy and advocacy page on the CalWalks website to let legislators know that you want to see that legislation pass this year.
This month, given that it is Bike Month, we thought we'd take a moment to share some personal stories about our personal enjoyment of walking and biking. I'm your host, Kevin Shin, Co-ED of California Walks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Miha Babalai, the other co-executive director at CalWalks.
And joining us today is our colleague Emilio, who you may recall from our October Halloween episode last year. As a former bike messenger, Emilio's got great stories to share with us.
Glad to have you back, Emilio.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So, to kick us off today, I want to share a bit of history about Bike Month, first of all. So the the concept for Bike Month got started with the League of American Bicyclists, and they celebrated in communities coast to coast. It was originally established in 1956 and has been a way for the league as well as a lot of local, local bike coalitions and bike organizations to share the joy of biking and just getting outdoors. When I worked at Bike LA, one of the things that I used to do for Bike Month, because we, during the pandemic in particular, we had sort of given up our office space. We didn't really have a commute per se. But what I would do is, as a part of Bike Month, I would oftentimes, figure out what the current average commute for someone in LA was, which typically ended up being about 30-ish miles or so, and I would go and do a 30-ish mile ride as a tribute to Bike Month. So that was always one of the ways that I participated. But what about for each of you? How have you all celebrated Bike Month in the past?
I didn't know about Bike Month until I actually started to work with Walk Sacramento up here in the state capitol. I was a program coordinator, and I said, hey, there's this thing called Bike Month, and you're going to be doing events for it. And I remember thinking, like, how come I never heard of this as a kid? Because a lot of the Bike Month activities were geared towards elementary and middle school students. So I would every Bike Month go and do a bike rodeo or some kind of walking or biking event at a school, just to pump up the kids and encourage them to bring their bikes to school and hopefully get them to use their bikes a little bit more in the month of May.
Nice. What about you, Emilio?
Yeah, just like, Miha, I didn't really know about Bike Month until I got involved with Cal Walks and got involved with the league. And now it's on my calendar. It's right after Earth Day at the end of April. So it's an opportunity just to be outdoors more and be intentional about using my bike as opposed to driving around or going long distance to do something fun. I mean, for Bike Month, I'm privileged enough to live next to some local bike paths. But there's also some pretty big parking lots near me around the DMV where I can go and practice some maneuvers and go with some friends who like to roller skate as well and just do some more outdoor activities.
Nice.
Nice. You mentioned practicing some maneuvers, and I thought, oh, we should share that. Emilio and Kevin are both league certified cycling instructors, because I don't know why else you would go into a parking lot and just do maneuvers for fun.
Hey, it's a great way to, it's a great way to practice skills.
Yeah.
I do it for when I'm, when I have just a little bit of time at either the beginning or the end of one of my rides. When I ride my motorcycle, I oftentimes will go and find an empty space and practice some particularly like low speed maneuvers. Same with a bike, right? Like
hmm
going at speed where the bike is pretty stable is actually pretty easy. It's
Hmm.
those like it's when you really need to do a tight maneuver at a low speed that takes a lot of skill.
Hmm. Great.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for us. What is y'all's earliest memory of riding a bike? And I'll give you some time to think about it. I can go first. Mine is from the summer after fifth grade. We had just moved from Fullerton to the Anaheim Pocket in Orange County. And in fifth grade, at least in the school district that I attended, you got to take a bicycle driving course. So at the end of it, you actually earned a bicycle driver's license. And I still remember it was made out of like to look like a DMV license with the date, the name, and your photo on it. So I spent a lot of that summer riding my bike in my new neighborhood, just trying to explore. I had just gotten, I think, to the age where my parents let me go out on my bike alone and didn't ask where I was going. They just asked me to come back at a certain time, which now thinking back, it's like, how did they expect me to know when to come back? I didn't have a watch. There was no cell phones. They were the size of bricks. I was just supposed to have an internal clock to not come home late. But definitely having a bike was a great way to explore that neighborhood and actually to meet other kids because it was something that just kids did all the time, right? Um, and I remember that I was riding my bike mostly on residential streets because I didn't know the neighborhood that well. But there was two bigger avenues that I would ride on because I found out that there was a neighborhood liquor store that had Slurpees, and that almost guaranteed there would be kids there. So I rode along Chapman Avenue to get to the liquor store, just honestly to see what was happening at the liquor store. I didn't intend to have a Slurpee because I was riding my bike, but just to see, if anything was happening, if there was anybody there. And as I was riding along Chapman Avenue where the liquor store was, all of a sudden a car hit me. I actually didn't even realize that a car hit me until someone was helping me up. And I was trying to think like, what happened? And I realized, oh wow, I'm off my bike. Somebody must have hit me. And there was the liquor store patrons. Some of them got out of their cars and came and helped me up. And were trying to see if I was okay. And as I was trying to like orient myself on what happened, I saw that the driver had stayed behind and looked really concerned. And after I was able to get up and take a few steps, they asked, are you okay? And, I right away was like, yeah, I'm fine. Probably not wanting to like cause a scene or, have them call an ambulance because that would have really gotten me in trouble. And so after asking me a couple of times and me insisting like, yeah, yeah, I'm okay, they let the driver drive off and I got back on my bike and slowly went back home. Partly from the pain, but partly because I remember for the first time I realized, wow, there's a lot of driveways when I'm riding my bike. And I was a kid, I was in 5th grade, so I was, what, 11 years old? I was riding on the sidewalk, I didn't have the courage to ride in the street, on such a major street, and on the way home, I just kept thinking, like, "Look at all these driveways, like, a car could come out and hit me anytime," and I remember it was like a core memory that kind of, like, cemented, a muscle memory for me, so that, like, every time I was on a bike, if I was going down the street and I noticed a driveway, I would always look. I would always slow down to see, like, is there a car gonna pop out? Um, and yeah, that's one of my least favorite memories of riding a bike. But it's like definitely a core memory. Like I said, developed a muscle memory in me to always be really, really careful around where cars might be backing out or exiting. I have a ton of other favorite bike memories, but like definitely when somebody asks me about biking, like this memory always comes to mind because it was so just instrumental in, I think, um, me being more careful and being aware of my surroundings, like getting me out of like my head as a kid, as a kid, you're just, happily go luckily riding your bike. And this was the experience for me that I was like, oh, wait, I have to actually pay attention. Like, I can't rely on the adults to do what's right. Um, so that's mine. Who'd
I
like to go next?
I feel like that story though is like every parent's nightmare right now, and it's like one of the reasons why parents
Yes.
are so overly protective of their children is these, is they're afraid that something like that will happen
Yes.
to their kid by having them go and ride a bike. And honestly, because I went to high school in Fullerton, so I know
Hmm.
exactly kind of the area that you're talking
Hmm.
about. And I barely would be willing to ride a bike on Chapman, much less on the sidewalk on Chapman. So the
Yes.
fact that you were doing it as a kid and like seems pretty comfortable with it for a while, is pretty telling, right? Like I feel like the way that we have approached biking and sort of our expectations around walking and biking have changed so dramatically because of
Yes.
so many of these behaviors, both of drivers, but also just like how parents have become more protective of their children, has really
Yeah.
changed the way in which we sort of approach all of these things. So, but I'm glad to hear that you were not severely injured
Yes.
because that certainly could have been bad. But it certainly sounds like something good came out of that, and you developed a really good and very positive habit out of it, which is ultimately a good thing.
Yes, I did. I did. I didn't tell my parents because I was afraid they weren't going to let me go riding anymore, but I was definitely personally more careful and more aware, and also even like because I'm have a lot of younger siblings, more protective of them and making sure to tell them like wear your helmet and look out for cars. And I think without even though I had that bicycle driver's license class, without that and just getting out on a bike, that's what that's how you learn, is literally your
Right.
firsthand experience most of the time. Um, a lot of schools now do have safe routes to school programs, but back then I think it was pretty rare. And this is just how you learned, like, that hurts, don't do that again. Pay attention.
I
And
like how you
perhaps
mentioned I like how you
Mhm.
mentioned the development of the muscle memory,
Mhm.
because it's one thing to read about bike safety skills. It's one thing to have a class and be told, but unless you're on the bike
Yes.
experiencing it, that's how you develop the muscle memory, the peripheral vision,
Mhm.
and the awareness of your surroundings. Luckily,
Exactly.
you were young and you had rubber bones, you bounced.
Yes. They bounce back, yeah. Yeah. Anyone wanna go next? Emilio?
Sure, I have a short memory that I like to think about, and it's similar. I was very young when I learned how to ride a bike. I taught myself how to ride a bike,
Mm.
and it was out of just being left behind. All the older kids in the community, one day, I just saw them parading down the road on a bikes, and I was like, "What? When did this happen?" So in my efforts to keep up, I would run along, but they just would leave me
Yeah.
behind. And one of my great uncles, he was a hoarder, so he had so much junk, and he had piles of bikes. So I
Mm.
just went to his yard, picked one out, and I just spent the days, practicing and falling and trying to roll down hills and go downstairs. And luckily, it was in a nice controlled environment. There was no driveways, there wasn't speeding cars in the community. It was a very mountainous area. But I taught myself how to ride, and I still couldn't keep up, but at least I was close behind with the pack. And
Well,
so
that's
that's a
so
good.
cute.
It's a fun memory for me because just wanting to be part of the community,
Mhm.
part of the group. It really motivated me, and it's a helpful memory too because I think about now. There's times when I reflect on how I taught my little brother how to ride a bike after that, so he wouldn't be left behind. Years later, I taught my nephew and niece how to ride a bike, and my brother's teaching his son how to ride a bike now.
Mhm.
So, it's like
Mhm.
passing the torch, and it
Yes,
feels
yeah.
Right.
really good. So it's a great memory to have people included. So there's so many benefits to riding, physical health, benefits, the mental health benefits.
Yeah.
Even now, when I'm older, I prefer riding solo, and because it just helps me clear my mind,
Right.
and just get
Mhm.
zone out, ride a nice bike path. And then it's also good for the environment, and it saves
Mhm.
money too. The less time you drive, the more gas money you save. So
Exactly,
Certainly
yeah.
with $6 plus like almost $7 a gallon gas here in the LA area, like I that last part, about saving money is super important right now for a lot of folks.
yeah, definitely.
I have to laugh because the image of like the group of kids riding bikes is like definitely like what I grew up with, and just like so fun to think back on, like, 10, 12 kids together in a group all just riding their bikes around. Sometimes you had nowhere to go, but you're just riding around looking for something to keep you busy. And then I'm also thinking of my neighborhood, which is full of kids on e-bikes. They're going at like a totally different speed, and the experience is like so different, not
Right.
only for people on the street that are riding or walking next to them, but just for them too. They're going so much faster. They're not noticing things that I think probably me and Emilio and you, Kevin, would notice about our neighborhoods, going at kind of like that human powered speed.
Right.
Like I used to know like what everybody had in their yard, and the neighbors that would say hi versus the ones that wouldn't, where to avoid the dogs that jumped on the fence if you rode
Exactly.
by. And you don't
Yeah,
have to worry about that if you're, going real fast and loud.
true. It's funny because the type of trouble that we used to be able to get into is very different from the type of trouble that kids these days are getting
Yes.
into. And actually, that sort of ties into my story. So this isn't necessarily the first memory that I have of riding a bike, but it's one that always sticks with me. And so like folks that know me know I'm a little bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I'm somebody uh, that likes to try crazy things. Um, I grew up in Diamond Bar, and we lived on a cul-de-sac, and the cul-de-sac had one driveway that was like way above everybody else, and so it was like way higher. And because of that, there was a big, like it had a pretty steep slope. And it made for the perfect like ramp to get up speed if you wanted to do, dumb things. So one day, we're playing with the neighborhood kids, and one of our neighbors has figured out how to like take a piece of plywood and some old stuff, and we set up a ramp in the middle of the cul-de-sac. There are no cars around, and like, it's just a bunch of kids playing in the street. And one of us, I don't even remember who, but one of us must have dared the other to go to the top of this crazy driveway, come all the way down, and then try and take the ramp. And of course, this was not a well-constructed ramp. This was a like you want to talk about cobbled together with like the least amount of attachments, and you know there's basically nothing holding it together except bubblegum and wishes, like basically. So we all eventually ended up taking turns. And I think I was one of the last ones to go. And because everybody had gone through already, the ramp had probably become structurally unsound at that point. And so I'm on this bike that I didn't use my regular bike because I was at least smart enough to realize that if something went wrong, I might break something. So I went and I grabbed, I think we had an old bike that was left over from when my brother was learning to ride a bike. And so it was a little bit on the small side, not exactly the right, there's a lot of things that could go wrong here. And sure enough, I walk it up to the top of the driveway, comes screaming down as, no brakes, no nothing, just comes barreling down, come around and face the little makeshift ramp. And as soon as I hit it, the ramp bent and cracked. And so it brings me to a dead stop. I go flipping over the handlebars again. Luckily, as a I was probably in, I don't know, I was probably like late elementary school, maybe like early junior high kind of time frame, and we're pretty resilient at that
Hmm.
point. So I was very fortunate that I didn't get anything worse than a couple of scrapes, no broken bones, maybe a couple of bruises. But I definitely like flipped over the handlebars, landed sprawled out on the asphalt, and that has always been like one of the stories of riding a bike. And it's funny to think about it now and to kind of think back to it. But certainly as a kid, like we did all kinds of dumb things. And to, the point that both of you have made, right, about sometimes you just got to go out and make mistakes and you learn from those mistakes and you learn not to do it again. And I sure
Mhm.
as heck did not ever try uh, barreling down that driveway and trying to hit a ramp again with my neighbors ever again. Um, but I mean, it's still fun to think about, even though it was probably painful at the time. These are the types of fun memories that I feel like we get to have nowadays.
Mhm.
Um, but also, like a lot of kids these days don't necessarily they don't get into that type of trouble. They don't get the opportunity to make those mistakes, and I think they're worse off for it. So I'm hoping that these types of stories inspire folks to let their kids go out and make a few mistakes, even things that are
Mhm.
hopefully things that won't cause them any serious injury, but something that will give them the opportunity to learn a life experience that says, okay, yeah, maybe I don't do that again.
Mhm. I I can only imagine how hurt you were.
I
Um,
must have I
but I
must have been
definitely
not that bad because
you
like
learned to fall because probably previous experiences, you just learned to fall not horribly wrong.
right, for
Um,
sure.
what I was thinking of when you said that is that I feel like now kids are kind of being split into two groups where their parents are either very risk averse and they're not even going out on bikes at all, or like I said, in my neighborhood, it's a lot of Ukrainian, Russian, other Eastern European and a diverse population where their parents are totally fine with risk. So like the kids are doing wheelies on the e-motorbikes and the e-scooters and, you know, um, they are actually jumping off of dirt ramps and doing crazy stunts and things like that. So you have, these two groups of kids growing up now where they're getting to do things that maybe they would have never done as adults, right? Who would have let their kid go down like barrel down a driveway like that, but on an electric or motorized bicycle. And then these
True.
kids where like their parents really worry about them because there's the cars, now there's people on motorbikes, now there's more cars, the street is maybe not how it's supposed to be. And yeah, it's just something to think about, that kids have less opportunities to do these seemingly innocent activities, um,
Yeah, for sure.
that build so much character.
Definitely character building. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's one of my more memorable experiences from my youth. But actually, one of my personal kind of most memorable experiences was I did in 2013. I had the opportunity to ride at least the first day of the Pan Mass Challenge. And so, for folks not familiar with that, the Pan Mass Challenge is a fundraising ride for cancer, cancer research. It's done in Massachusetts, and normally it goes from kind of somewhere in the southern part of central Massachusetts all the way out to the very tip of the Cape, Provincetown. And so over 2 days, folks will ride from uh, Central Mass all the way to what was it? The Maritime. I'm trying to remember it's like the Maritime Museum
Mhm.
just at the very sort of start of the Cape, and that would be kind of the first leg, and the second day would be a second leg from the Maritime Center all the way out to the tip of the Cape. So it was a really like just an amazing experience having this really well organized ride where the first day was 111 miles was the total distance for the day, and so you've got several, the Pan Mass Challenge attracts a lot of riders, and I think on average it's typically like several thousand people, and so you can imagine that like for a 5 a.m. start with a few thousand riders out there, it's kind of chaos, but then sort of you get the fast riders, like they just take off and they go and are way, way ahead. And then everybody else sort of just stretches out into their little groups. But as you ride along the route, because the route typically is pretty set and doesn't change too much. So you've got people along the route who've seen it go by dozens of years at this point, and they're out there with drinks and food and like celebrating and cheering and just some folks are playing music in their neighborhoods. Like it's a really it goes from being just purely kind of a fundraiser to a very community event, and folks really take advantage of it as a way to get to know or get to know their neighbors and get to experience that together. So just being able to go and participate in that, participate as part of one of the teams. Shout out to Team Kermit, which is still riding around, and also my wife's cousin, who helped actually was the one that encouraged me to come out and ride with them. So that was a big opportunity for me to be able to do that, and it was the first time that I had ever ridden 100 miles in a day. So it was my first
Wow.
century ride
Wow.
back in 2013. And it was just again, such a tremendous experience, such an opportunity to be a part of something,
Hmm.
that's kind of a huge deal in
Hmm.
Massachusetts. And it was one of the sense of accomplishment you get at the end of that day when you finally roll through. And I thought I was going to be very much towards like the
Hmm.
end, one of the last few people. But I actually managed to, I think I rolled in somewhere around like 2:30, 3 o'clock, which was actually
Hmm.
pretty good because they didn't start sweeping people up until around 5. So I
Hmm.
actually wasn't the last, one of the last people to roll in. But it was still just like being able to like be amongst all of these fellow riders and just feeling that kind of energy is so much fun, and it's such a blast to be able to do that. So that's one of my favorite like personal
Hmm.
memorable bike rides was doing that ride back in 2013. It was also the day right before my birthday when I did it, and so the next day was I was just exhausted and tired, and so my wife was kind enough to she had bought me a massage
Hmm.
for my birthday, so I got to go and go and get a massage and get some of those tight muscles from that ride worked out.
Okay. I
How did
thought you were
you
going to say she bought you your favorite meal
how did you get
after
your
all the
bike out
effort.
there? Did you mail your bike out there or you rented one when you were out there?
Well, so I was living in
Mhm.
Oh,
Massachusetts
you were
at the
living there.
time.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I was living just outside of Boston.
Mhm.
We were in Medford, Mass. And this was actually a bike that is still out there because we ended up giving it to my wife's cousin because I didn't want to have to deal with transporting it all the way back to California when we moved. And I knew I wanted to it was also an excuse for me to upgrade my bike. I mean, just
There you go.
to be honest.
You're
So
done
it
with
was
it. Just throw it,
yeah,
throw it away.
it was an excuse to upgrade my bike. And so we were able to give it to my wife's cousin, and they've actually gotten use out of it. That bike has seen at least a couple more Pan Mass challenges because
Hmm.
my wife's cousin's kids uh, ended up using it at least once or twice for that ride in subsequent years. And then after moving back out to California, I finally upgraded to my first full carbon fiber bike. That was an opportunity for me to do that, and I took advantage of it to give myself a little upgrade.
Nice. So, at what mile do you start to feel like tired on a 100-mile bike ride? When do you feel like people that run marathons are sometimes like, oh, the halfway point's the hardest, or, the last few miles are the hardest. What was that point for you?
I
Or
feel
did you?
like for me, the lowest point was probably about mile 70 or so.
Mm-hmm.
I remember because it was shortly after I think it was shortly after the lunch break. Um,
Mhm.
I, I pulled in, gotten lunch, and getting back on the bike and leaving the rest area just sort of shortly after it. There was a big
Mhm.
hill, not a super long hill, but kind of steep. And I started cramping about two-thirds of the way up. And so that was probably the point where I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm actually going to make this, if I'm actually going to be able to finish this. But I powered through it, got up to the top, um, you know, uh, took out some of the supplements and some food and electrolytes that I had with me, and
Mhm.
you know, just tried to get as much of it down as I could so that I could restore the balance of electrolytes in my
Mhm.
body so that I could get back on the bike. And it took, I think I waited there for about 10-ish minutes to give my body a little bit of time to recover, and then got back on it. And I just sort of like pushed through the rest of it.
Mhm.
So I think that, yeah, if I recall correctly, that felt to me like the hardest point
Mhm.
during that ride.
I can imagine your body's like, "You just had lunch, go take a nap." But you're doing the, like, least stressful thing you can think of.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, what about you, Emilio?
Yeah, I really don't have any other major, bike
Mhm.
rides like that. I haven't done any
Yeah,
marathons or
me either.
anything. Like I said, the closest thing I would say would be like CicLAvia, which I've
Mm,
done a
mhm.
few times, and that's always fun because it's a combination of
Yeah.
riding the train sometimes to get
Mhm.
to where I'm going and then bringing my bike. The reason I was
Mhm.
asking about, how he shipped his bike or if you shipped it
Mhm.
because I always had a hard time taking my bike everywhere,
Mhm.
and it doesn't always it's not as much fun when you travel with your bike because you got to take it apart unless you have a collapsible bike.
Mhm.
And then when you put it back together, I don't know if this happens to you all, but when you put it back together, it doesn't always seem to fit
Doesn't
exactly
feel
how it
right.
was before. Yeah, like something's off. So I have to, mess with it a little more. And I actually had to change a flat tire on the train before,
Mhm.
which was fun, which was pretty interesting because it ended up being like a teachable moment. People were like trying to
Mhm.
give me advice.
Yes.
People
Yeah.
like chime in, when you're on the train. But yeah, CicLAvia is always fun. They just had one here on the west side in West LA where I'm
Mhm.
based out of, and taking the train that
Mhm.
short trip, then getting off and then just joining right in is always a lot of
Mhm.
fun.
Yeah.
And
That's actually a good plug because it's almost May, and that's when a lot of communities across the state start to have the open streets events. So if you're looking for a place to ride your bike with a lot of people walking, biking, and no competition from cars, look up open streets events in your area. You'll hopefully be able to find something that you can, walk or bike to. Well, Bike Month. It is about biking, but we all know that walking can be an equally important form of transportation and a way for people to stay healthy and fit. Um, and I was wondering if you all had any favorite places that you actually walk.
absolutely. Yeah,
Go
I,
ahead.
I love walking. I love walking the path all the way to the marina around Marina Del Rey.
Mhm.
So when you get to Marina Del Rey, it's a great place to walk. I'm really bad because I don't really shop there or buy a lot of stuff there, but sometimes I'll get like a crepe or something in the area.
Mhm.
They have some shops there. But the cool thing to see is when I walk through there, there's a place where seals gather. So that's a good
Mhm.
thing
Mm,
to watch. And then also, I can't remember if it's in August and September, but they have a boat taxi. It's a $2
Mm.
boat taxi. And so you just pay $2 and then they can taxi you around in the
Mhm.
little boat. And so it's like a free boat ride. Well, it's $2, but come on, like
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
it's two
That's
dollars
nothing.
for a boat ride. And it'll take you all the way around. There's like has multiple
Mhm.
stops. So I like walking out there because the
Mhm.
walk to get to the marina is nice. There's a nice multi-use path where it's either bike
Mhm.
or walk. And
right.
so sometimes I'll bike it, but sometimes I'll walk it to get
Mhm.
to the marina. And then, like I said, just go be close to the ocean,
Mhm.
listen to the water, people watch or look at the boats, people coming and going on the boats. Sometimes they have a range of like people who are there like with loud music and celebrating. Sometimes it'll be really quiet. Some people paddleboarding. It's just fun to see all the outdoor activity. People walking and biking in the area, and then also the $2 taxi. It's pretty fun too. So that's probably
Yeah.
my most recent like favorite place.
Yeah. I think you captured something that I feel like has changed about Bike Month over the years. I feel like now it's almost like May is the start of summer, and Bike
Mm,
Month is just like the opportunity to get out and about in your community. It doesn't
Hmm.
necessarily
for
have to be
sure.
by biking, scooter, skateboard, just get outside. And I think even a lot of the events around Bike Month have really just broadened to include all forms of active transportation, just to encourage people to get out there and experience their communities.
For sure. And so, like, speaking of experiencing the community, so I moved to San Pedro a few years ago, and before moving out here, we hadn't really spent all that much time actually exploring San Pedro. But one of the things that my wife and I have gotten in the habit of doing is we'll oftentimes take our e-bikes and ride all the way down to the very end of Western to White Point Beach,
Hmm.
and we'll go down there and park the bikes and walk along the beach. And of course, there's lots of tide pools. And so that's actually
Hmm.
become one of our favorite sort of walks and activities is to just go out to where there are tide pools, and just walk along the beach or like go and explore the rocks and check out all the little hermit crabs running
Hmm.
around. So it's kind of fun to go and do that. So White Point has some really great tide pools. There are some other really great tide pools in along the is it Abalone Cove in Rancho Palos Verdes, and then further down the coast, like Huntington Beach, that area, oftentimes,
Hmm.
or no, sorry, Crystal Cove has a lot of really cool tide pools down there as well. I remember going actually to Crystal Cove in high school and having the opportunity to explore the tide pools there as a part of my biology class. It was like a what do they call it? Scavenger hunt. We
Hmm.
did a scavenger hunt with all of the different like critters and creatures
Hmm.
and living organisms. But that's always like for me, right? It's fun to find places to walk where you get to enjoy some of these like nature experiences where you get the opportunity to see wildlife, you get the opportunity to really learn a little bit more about your environment and
Hmm.
surroundings. Like that's always the best part for me of any walk is hopefully I'm doing more than just, moving my feet, but I'm also
Hmm.
getting the opportunity to kind of experience and take in the surroundings
Hmm.
where I'm at.
Well, I cannot walk to the beach. If I started now, I'd probably get there tomorrow at the same time. Because I'm in Sacramento in Northern California, currently, but one of my favorite places to walk is the American River Bike Trail. Um, it's 32, 33 miles long. It's paved and it goes from downtown all the way up to the city of Folsom. It's just a great place to exercise, relax. You can bird and animal watch, fish, walk. Of course, you can bike. And I think one of the reasons it's my favorite is that um, I've never gone and not seen a ton of people on it of all
Hmm.
ages, all abilities. Even though it's called a bike trail, it really is just this multi-use path
Right.
that folks walk, bike, roller skate, do all sorts of things on. And it's just so fun, like, to see people from all walks of life and all ages and abilities out there just enjoying it, and, of course, a good part of it is along the river, so that's a bonus. Fresh air and water is good for mental health and just, visually, I think, on the ice, sometimes getting away from the busyness of the city. Um, so if anybody is ever up here in Sacramento, I definitely, recommend visiting the American River Bike Trail. Um, and I would say the only time it really truly is more of a bike trail is if you go on Saturday mornings, unless you want amateur and professional cyclists whizzing by you every 2 minutes. Go in the later morning, but otherwise it really is a multi-use trail and, yeah, just so many benefits to it. I think one thing that's different from the examples that you guys gave is that once you're on the trail, you're on the trail. You are not getting off to go and buy food. No crepe, no
Yeah.
crepes. You have to literally walk between cities and get out. So it really is like the focus is on being outside and walking and biking, from point A to point B. And that I think is in and of itself kind of like something relaxing that like it's just focused on the activity. Um, but yeah, there's so many great places across the state, and we obviously highlighted some, places that have other activities and are very scenic. But I think the majority of my walking is not to get a crepe and not in a scenic environment. It's just in my neighborhood.
Right.
Hmm.
And I think that's, where most of us get in our steps and experience walking and biking. And so, I just want to put a shout out for walk your neighborhood, see what's out there,
Absolutely.
because that's really where you're most likely to be able to do walking and biking on a daily basis. The to the marina and on the American River bike trail, that's a Saturday activity, but on a daily
Hmm.
basis, I'm walking with my family, like down to the Costco. Nothing
Right.
nothing too exciting, but still exploring our community on foot and on bike, and just enjoying being outside in the place that we live.
Yeah, I think that's, there's never a better uh, there's never a better call to action than to just simply go for a walk in your neighborhood. And it's always been something since we moved back to California back in 2014. That was always something that my wife and I very much were looking for in the communities where we lived, was hopefully the ability to actually be able to walk to different places and be able to just go and enjoy our community as a community and not be so dependent and so reliant on having
Mhm.
to take a car somewhere in order to actually be able to do some of our basic necessities.
Mhm.
So hope, and also recognizing that not everybody has that luxury, and not everybody has the ability to, go and use walking as a part of their daily activities. But even if you can't do it as a part of your commute, even if you can't do it as a part of getting to and from school, sometimes, especially as the days keep getting longer, as we're approaching the summer, if you have the opportunity just to go for a stroll in your own neighborhood
Mhm.
after dinner or something, take that opportunity, because if nothing else, it gives you an opportunity to kind of see your community, experience it a little bit more, and maybe understand it a little bit better.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's the best way to meet your neighbors that are coming outside. And I think it's also just to kind of get a sense of your community and your neighborhood. And, you know, um, a lot of the times people want to go walking in places where there's other people. So you could
Right.
be the reason that somebody else, looks outside and pops out of their house to walk because they know they're not going to be walking alone.
Yeah, for sure. It's a great way to build community. Well, I certainly hope that for those folks looking for some inspiration to get outside this May, we'll be able to draw on some of these stories that we shared and hopefully seek to make some new memories of their own.
Yeah, and if you'd like some tips for walking and biking safely for this May, check out our resources available on our website at calwalks.org.
And exclusively for Bike Month, if you make a monthly contribution to California Walks, you can get a free limited edition California Walks Step Into Your Power t-shirt, like this one that I'm currently wearing. The shirt is only going to be available this month on the CalWalk store and for those who make a monthly contribution. So just remember that your donation is tax deductible and helps to support our work fighting for safer streets across the state.
Yeah. And if you're not interested in a t-shirt, there's tons more items in our merch store, and anything that you purchase helps us to make a difference throughout the state.
Finally, don't forget that we are working on a variety of programs and policy efforts this year. We already shared about AB 2276, the Stop Super Speeders bill, but you can check out the other policies we're engaging around on our policy and advocacy page on the website.
And in the spring, we usually start to travel for our programs. We end up visiting a variety of communities across the state. So make sure to sign up for our newsletter on our website at calwalks.org and see where we're headed this year.
And as always, a special thanks to the California Endowment for their support in making this podcast possible.
CalWalks is a 501c3 nonprofit that relies on your support to help make our advocacy and education work possible. You can help support our efforts by visiting calwalks.org/donate or purchasing your very own CalWalks t-shirt on our online store. The links are in the description.
Thanks for listening today to Walking Stories. We have many more stories to bring you this year, so make sure that you like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be reminded when our new episodes drop. Have a great May, a great bike month, and we look forward to sharing our stories with you again next month.